There you are.
Cut! That's fine.
Lucille Ball was an iconic comedian.
I love the picture. I even love the producer.
That's what I like to hear.
Hey, you don't mind she loves the producer?
I'm the producer.
She was a power player, instrumental in shaping various genres on television, not just comedy.
Even things like Star Trek. She greenlit that. Without Lucille Ball, there's no Mr. Spock.
She was a feminist and was the first woman to have a controlling share in a big movie studio.
She wasn't very comfortable in that role. She was put in a position where she had to convince the executives to be comfortable with her.
When Lucille Ball dies, her estate passes through to her husband, Gary Morton, who not long after remarries. His wife, Susie Morton, decides that she is going to put Lucille Ball's items up for sale.
Susie Morton and Lucy Arnaz are fighting this big battle because Lucy Arnaz wants her mother's items back.
These were very sentimental things that had a lot of value to the family. So Lucille Ball would be rolling in her grave if she found out these personal items were up for auction.
This is one of those disputes that's one of the stranger ones and one of the uglier ones.
When a celebrity checks out, there's no shortage of people ready to cash in. There's a ton of money to be made on the backs of dead celebrities. And with millions of dollars at stake, the battles over the estates of the rich and famous can lead to some serious drama. This is a story of how Lucille Ball earned a gigantic fortune as the Queen of Comedy, and the estate battle that erupted nearly 21 years after her death that shines a spotlight on just how far someone will go to bank on a dead celebrity's fame. Some 7 decades since the premiere of her groundbreaking show I Love Lucy, everyone's favorite redhead is as popular as ever.
People are still watching that show all over the world every day, including me. I watch I Love Lucy every day. I still do. I've seen every episode, I don't know how many times.
Even 30 years after her death, the syndication rights for I Love Lucy are very significant. They're almost $20 million a year.
Even today, Lucille Ball remains extremely bankable, with merchandising lines featuring her image raking in over $1 million a year.
It's a generation of consumers that have a lot of different choices, but when they can go back and remember someone that was very iconic, someone that represented an era, someone that stood out, somebody that stood for something, consumers want a part of that.
Personal heirlooms belonging to Lucille is yet another lucrative revenue stream for her estate. There's an ever-growing generation of eager collectors willing to pay.
People are endlessly curious about things that celebrities owned and used, and there's nothing more valuable than something that a celebrity once possessed.
I, for one, am a collector. I live in a Lucy house. I have memorabilia all over my house.
When Lucille Ball dies in 1989, her estate is valued at $40 million. It's comprised of homes in Beverly Hills, Palm Springs, and Aspen, Colorado. Cars including a 1984 Silver Spur Rolls-Royce and a 1962 Silver Ghia Coupe. A collection of fine art. Precious jewelry with a total estimated worth of over $83,000. These same items will fetch close to $178,000 at auction. She also leaves behind over 15 signature red wigs. And a treasure trove of Hollywood memorabilia and personal heirlooms worth thousands. Some of Lucille's possessions stay with her second husband, Gary Morton, while others are passed to her children, Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr.
And then when Gary dies, all of his personal effects, all of his estate, he leaves to his second wife, Susie Morton. He was only married to Susie for 3 years at the time of his death.
These items include love letters from Gary to Lucille, anniversary and birthday cards between the couple. Susie Morton decides to put Lucille's belongings on the auction block, including Lucy and Gary's intimate correspondence.
And when Lucy Arnaz, Lucille Ball's natural child, found out about this, she was absolutely livid.
What ensues is a battle between Lucy Arnaz, who's intent on protecting her famous mother's legacy, and Susie Morton, a virtual stranger who's looking to exploit it.
It really makes me question where Susie Morton is financially. Is it really worth benefiting off of Lucy's estate and causing so much pain to her kids?
But how did Lucille Ball build that legacy to become not only a comedy icon, but a power player in Hollywood?
When we think of Lucille Ball, the first thing we think of is the funny redhead. But that's not really what we should be thinking of. We should be thinking of this pioneering businesswoman who hit it so big in Hollywood that she changed the rules.
She was probably the most unique talent that Hollywood ever produced, and from the beginnings of her career, you would have never imagined it, and probably neither would she.
Born Lucille Desiree Ball in Jamestown, New York on August 6, 1911, Lucille is just 3 years old when her family experiences their first trauma.
When her father passed away, I believe he was only 27 years old. Lucy's mother was pregnant with her brother Fred. And the family didn't have a lot of money. And ultimately, it was the grandparents that Lucy was raised by because the mother had to go to work.
In 1922, her grandfather, Fred, buys a house in the country for $2,000.
And Lucy is ecstatic because her entire family moves in, her immediate and her extended.
Young Lucy has a fiery personality, but her hair color isn't a match. Yet.
Her trademark was really her red hair, but a lot of people don't realize that she wasn't a natural redhead.
Becoming an actress is her driving ambition.
So the mother decided, I need to send Lucy to an acting school. Like, it was a school, professional school where she could learn her craft.
The future Oscar-winning actress Bette Davis happens to be the star pupil, but Lucille's so intimidated and shy, she fails miserably.
Her teacher actually said she should give up because she was never going to make it.
Lucille returns home, but in 1927, her entire family's life is turned upside down.
She was living with her grandparents, and there was an accident at their family home.
Lucille's brother received a .22 caliber rifle for his birthday, and with their grandfather supervising, he and friends were target shooting when a stray bullet hits a young neighbor.
A neighborhood boy was shot and paralyzed, and her grandfather was sued.
Because Lucille's grandfather is the adult in charge, he's sued for negligence, and the family loses their home to pay for the boy's medical care. Determined to help, Lucille Ball heads back to New York City to find work.
I think at that point, Lucy realized that I have to take care of my family. I have a responsibility here, and I felt that she always, felt that way.
Eventually, Lucille manages to find work as a model, most notably for famous hat designer Hattie Carnegie. Lucille goes by a stage name, Diane Belmont, and earns up to $35 a week in the midst of the Great Depression. But being a movie star is still Lucille's dream. And in 1933, she gets cast as a chorus girl in a Hollywood film called Roman Scandals.
It's the Depression era, and yet the film industry is still booming. The chorus girls are making about $300 a week, and then they get bumped up to $600 to $700 a week with night shoots and overtime. Now, the rest of the chorus girls, they're out having fancy dinners, buying mink coats. But what is Lucy doing? She is putting that money away. And why is she doing that? Because Lucy's thrifty.
Lucille decides to stay in Hollywood and signs with a new studio as a contract player, earning $75 a week.
When Lucy had finally saved up a little bit of money, she brings her entire family from Jamestown, New York, to be with her in Los Angeles.
Family was extremely important to Lucille Ball.
From 1933 to 1950, Lucille appears in every kind of picture, from musicals to comedies to dramas. She's come to be known as the Queen of the Bees.
Well, then I shall buy it from you.
I don't wish to sell it.
I pay a good price.
A B movie is a movie that's made by a second-tier movie studio with second-tier talent. They're the kind of movies that you would go to see as the double feature on a drive-in. It's not that they're bad films, but they weren't Gone with the Wind.
Lucy had a very busy career in movies. So when you see Lucy in the movies prior to I Love Lucy, you see a diversity of different roles, not just Lucy Ricardo being funny.
You and I have a lot in common.
In 1940, Lucille is making more than enough to support her mother and grandfather.
At one point, she's making $1,000 a week, which is a lot of money for the time. And she decides to start spending just a little bit of it. She buys herself a mink coat and hires a maid.
But financial security and a career isn't enough for Lucille. She wants to have it all.
The most significant thing that happens to Lucille Ball during her RKO B-movie Queen of the Bees career is that she meets a young guy who's playing a bodyguard on the set of one of her films. They start to talk, and before long, they date and fall in love. That man's name was Desi Arnaz.
Desi Arnaz is born into a wealthy family in Cuba who escaped to Miami during the 1933 revolution.
Machado, 9 years chief executive of Cuba, abdicates, and something close to anarchy breaks out.
Desi is a band leader who's credited with bringing the conga line to America. After a whirlwind romance, they elope on November 30th, 1940.
This was a bold move for Lucille Ball to marry Desi Arnaz. He was 6 years younger than she was, and back in those days, people really didn't marry men who were younger than they are.
Lucille Ball did not care. She married for love. Like many men of his generation, Desi Arnaz was a man with many vices. First of all, he was a musician. He was known to be a womanizer. He was also known to be a chain-smoking, degenerate gambler. But he had something special about him, which people saw on screen in I Love Lucy. Lucy saw it years before and didn't hold it against him.
Lucille and Desi have undeniable chemistry, but everyone agrees they're polar opposites in many ways, especially when it comes to money.
For example, they go to Vegas and both of them each win $18,000. What does Desi do? She goes out and buys a boat. What does Lucy do? She calls her financial advisor.
Soon after their wedding, Lucille and Desi decide to buy their first home.
At first, the couple is living in Hollywood, but then they realize this is not exactly where they want to raise their family.
They want to invest in property in the San Fernando Valley. The developer wants $14,500 up front.
Unfortunately, the house is a little bit more money than Lucy and Desi want to spend. So they use their fame, they parlay their fame into a really big discount on this house.
They get the house with a $1,500 down payment and a 10-year mortgage.
Lucy and Desi's negotiating abilities were very persuasive.
They christen their home Desi Lou, and Lucy decorates with secondhand furniture. By 1948, Lucille is growing frustrated with her movie career.
She was never a big movie star, not to the length that she wanted to be.
And whatever her true talents were, absolutely did not shine in that environment. It wasn't until that whole portion of her career in the mid to late 1940s is over, and she has the chance to do a little bit of comedy on My Favorite Husband, which was on radio, that she really began to connect with audiences.
In 1950, CBS wants to transfer the radio sitcom My Favorite Husband to the newly emerging medium of television. Lucille says she'll do it on one condition. She wants Desi to play her husband.
At this time, marriage is really hard on both Desi and Lucy. Desi is out on the road, traveling, touring, and Lucy's left at home, and she really wants to start a family. And as she famously said, you can't get pregnant over the phone.
But CBS can't fathom Desi in the role of Lucille's husband.
Now, CBS at the time did not want Desi Arnaz to play Ricky Ricardo. And she demanded that if I do this show, I want Desi to do it. That was tremendous back then, tremendous. Remember, Desi Arnaz was Cuban. This was 1950, and this was a very big deal in diversity on television.
I Love Lucy will premiere on October 15th, 1951. It's a history-making moment that has the couple risking their professional reputations and personal fortunes. Will audiences respond to the adventures of a zany, red-headed housewife and her Cuban bandleader husband? When legendary television star Lucille Ball dies in 1989, she is personally worth an estimated $40 million. But her enduring popularity as a cultural icon continues to earn significant royalties through merchandising and syndication rights.
I'm sure it makes anywhere from several $100,000 in royalties to several $1 million in royalties.
And when it comes to items that actually belong to Lucille in her lifetime, there are legions of fans ready to pay for a piece of the legend at auction.
Lucille Ball was a celebrity, and that means anything that she touched had value, a lot of value.
The personal memorabilia that a celebrity has, especially after they pass away, can often be one of the most valuable assets that the estate has.
It was the 1951 premiere of her groundbreaking sitcom, I Love Lucy, that turned Lucille Ball into a household name.
70 years later, is played all over the world at different times. She's the most familiar face of any personality in television history.
But back in 1950, Lucille and her real-life husband, Desi Arnaz, are just embarking on the pilot episode for CBS. They're doing it through their own production company, Desilu, to the tune of $19,000.
Right from the start, Lucy knows that she wants to work with Desi. And we all know that in Hollywood, the hours are long and the temptations are deep. So if she keeps her husband right next to her and they develop projects together and work together, the chance of a successful marriage, of a happy family life, are stronger than not.
In the middle of pre-production, Lucille discovers she's pregnant. They're overjoyed, but Lucille is cautious since she's miscarried a few times already.
She was having her first child at 40. Now, in today's society, that's nothing unusual. Back then, that's very unusual.
Desi celebrates the baby news by ordering construction of an addition to their home. The cost of the new nursery wing is $23,000, $6,000 more than what they originally paid for the house in the first place. Once the pilot episode is in the can, Lucille and Desi are eager to begin work on the next episode. But that's when the wrangling with the network begins.
They negotiated like tough, aggressive negotiators. They wanted a certain type of film being used. They wanted a live audience. They wanted a multicam, which hadn't yet been done.
CBS finally agrees to Lucille and Desi's demands, but not without a steep price. Lucille and Desi don't want to record their sitcom using the standard technology of the day because they consider it poor quality. They want to use film, which is twice the cost. The couple ends up taking a $1,000 a week pay cut to pay for it, bringing their joint weekly salary to $4,000. But in exchange, Lucille and Desi negotiate for ownership of the film negatives of the episodes, giving them the rights to resell them if they wanted to in the future.
There was no such thing as a rerun in those days, so nobody thought they would have any value. They just might be archived in a vault, but it turned out that reruns were probably the single most important and most valuable thing you could have for a television series.
On July 17th, 1951, Lucille gives birth to their daughter, Lucy Desiree Arnaz. And a few months later, on October 15th, 1951, I Love Lucy's first episode airs on CBS.
That was the beginning of what in television they call the three-camera shoot, which is pretty much been the standard ever since, from the Dick Van Dyke Show to the Mary Tyler Moore Show to Friends and Seinfeld. It's the way television is made, including right up until The Big Bang Theory.
I Love Lucy is an instant sensation. Lucille Ball's comic timing, physical daring, and irrepressible personality turn her into a huge star.
Everybody loved Lucy, and it was always like that. Always.
Within 4 episodes, it's in the top 10 for ratings. By 20 shows, they're #1 and will stay there for the next 3 years. By December 1951, nearly 16 million people, about 1 in 9 Americans, are tuning into I Love Lucy.
During the hour when I Love Lucy was on, water usage would go down, and so would electricity. And why is that? Because everyone's sitting just right in front of their television sets, not doing anything else.
People were literally raised on I Love Lucy, and it became an influence not just in future television production, but in people's lives. It was appointment viewing.
Lucille Ball is riding the wave of fame and fortune, but a year into the series, she discovers she's pregnant again. Personally, she's overjoyed but terrified this will spell the end of I Love Lucy.
Lucy is very nervous about telling the executives that she's pregnant because, you know, the word sex wasn't ever mentioned on television, and you never saw a pregnant woman on TV. So when she finally approached them, she was so surprised that the network executives actually embraced the pregnancy.
Lucille Ball makes television history when her real-life pregnancy is written into the show. On January 19, 1953, Lucille Ball delivers her son, Desi Arnaz Jr., by cesarean in real life. And that night, 44 million Americans tune in to watch the episode where Lucy gives birth to little Ricky.
1/5 of the US population tuned in to watch. And Lucy and Desi, they received over 30,000 personal congratulations for the baby.
The episode continues to be a ratings legend, and Lucille Ball's maternity leave actually helps to launch another television first.
When Lucille Ball did take some time off after having her baby, the show needed to fill some time, so they did something totally novel and new. They decided to show reruns.
1953 was a banner year for the couple. Lucille Ball wins an Emmy, and Desi Arnaz cuts a major sponsorship deal.
The biggest tobacco company in the country was Philip Morris.
Say, Philip Morris.
Oh? Is there any other kind?
Not for you, there isn't. Nothing but the best for Mr. Ricardo.
Desi went to them and cut an $8 million deal that helped to defray the cost of production and also made him and Lucy both a little bit wealthier.
Lucille and Desi get $5 million personally from the sponsorship, increasing the value of their production company significantly.
You know, Desi Lou was valued at approximately $10 million, but remember, this was like 60 years ago. If you took that $10 million now, it would be astronomical. Astronomical.
And then there was the untapped market for the show-related merchandise that would help build an audience all year round.
I Love Lucy had tremendous fan appeal. In the height of their TV show, in just 1 year, 1953, they brought in over $500,000 just in royalties from merchandise sales.
Massive wealth and stardom meant that Lucille could give her kids and extended family the security she so desperately craved. But fame has a downside. When she and Desi received kidnapping threats, they decide to sell the Desilu Ranch and look for a house in Beverly Hills. It's Lucille who finds the house, and even though it's not listed, offers the owners $75,000 on the spot. She ends up paying $85,000, which was a steal for the neighborhood.
Lucy was a great deal maker, without a doubt, and that's because that's how Lucy was raised.
Dealing with the demands of a hit show, running a production company, and raising a family is grueling, and by 1957, Lucille and Desi are ready to call it quits on the sitcom. They sign a $12 million deal to produce and star in monthly hour-long specials and promptly turn around and take another massive gamble.
All they knew was that everything that they had done up until then had turned to gold, so there was no reason not to take control of the means of production.
They buy RKO Studios for $6.15 million and rename it Desilu Studios.
Considering what Lucy's background was, to write a check for that much money, she was petrified.
1 year later, the company's profits soar, with $24 million in sales and more than $800,000 for Lucille and Desi personally.
Desilu Productions turned into one of the most successful production companies in the history of Hollywood.
This was a very, very valuable studio.
At the end of some of the biggest television series of the 1960s, you always see a card and it says, a Desilu production, or filmed at Desilu.
Lucille Ball has more money than she's ever had in her life, but the stress of running a multi-million-dollar corporation is taking a toll on their marriage. Desi was back to his old ways of drinking, gambling, and stepping out with other women, and Lucille was miserable.
Lucy and Desi were very much in love for a very long time. But his cheating and gambling became too much for Lucille Ball. She just couldn't take it anymore.
The end of her marriage will haunt Lucille, but within a few years, she will have a new man, a new TV show, and a new job that will cement her wealth and icon status.
So it's the 1960s. Women do not hold positions of power. Lucille Ball does.
Lucille Ball is one of the most well-known and beloved celebrities of all time.
Lucille Ball was very iconic. She had the #1 television show of the 50s. Future generations remember who she is, and especially with the reruns and the syndication.
When I was a kid, a lot of the reruns would always show, and that's what we did during the summer. Just hours and hours and hours watching the Ricardos.
While the marriage of their fictional counterparts on I Love Lucy is a happy one, by the late 1950s, Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz's real-life relationship is in trouble.
There'd been trouble between Lucy and Desi for years, even while I Love Lucy was still on the air. One of the reasons they canceled the show was because they were finding it difficult to work together.
In March 1960, Lucille files for divorce.
She filed for divorce under the grounds of mental cruelty. We don't know too much about the details of the divorce. And when I say details, I mean the distribution of the assets and the property. They had amassed a lot of money. They had a lot of intellectual property together. They owned a studio together. There was a lot to hash out here. But in some ways, it's good that we don't know what happened. No one really wants to know the dirty laundry of Lucille Ball and Desi Arnaz.
Their breakup is one of the highest profile divorces in American history at the time.
The news of the divorce leaks out, and the studio receives over 8,000 letters protesting, pleading for this not to happen.
It wasn't exactly a happy ending, and they were very bitter towards each other, and Lucy was suddenly on her own. And what do? And then Lucy at that time decided, I want to tackle Broadway.
While starring in the musical Wildcat in New York City, Lucille goes on a double date and meets stand-up comedian Gary Morton. About 11 years younger than Lucille, he's as different from Desi as one could get. Sparks fly immediately.
Gary Morton was the exact kind of person she needed, and he came along at just the right time.
Less than a year later, Lucille and Gary Morton tie the knot.
She made sure that they had a prenuptial agreement. I mean, she was a multi-millionaire, and he really wasn't at the same financial level as her. So it made a lot of sense for her to do this.
By all accounts, Lucille is very content in her marriage. Gary is devoted to her, and she brings him into the family business as a producer at Desi Lou.
He was the behind-the-scenes guy. He was no competition for her on camera because that wasn't his interest and it wasn't his expertise.
But Lucille's connection to Desi remains strong, not only because of their kids Lucy and Desi Jr., but their creative child, Desi Lou Studios. So when Desi Lou is desperate for a new comedy series, she jumps back into television. The Lucy Show premieres on October 1st, 1962.
When she did I Love Lucy, Desi Arnaz handled everything. All Lucy had to do was go and be funny. And Lucy was now doing the Lucy Show. She suddenly had to take control.
The Lucy Show introduces TV audiences to another iconic red-haired female comedian.
Carol Burnett was a rising star. Lucy recognized her talent, and Lucy became a mentor to her of sorts.
With Lucille Ball starring and producing, the sitcom runs for 6 years and is never out of the top 10 in the ratings.
Carol Burnett told me a very interesting story about Lucy. There was a script that she didn't like on the Lucy Show, and she went in and she felt that she had to be, she had to be forceful about it. She had to be demanding about it. And, word got out that Lucy suddenly wasn't Lucille Ball. She had balls. She was Lucille Ball.
The Lucy Show resurrects the studio's fortunes, but by November 1962, Desi wants out.
Lucy and Desi were able to work together for many years. But eventually, Desi loses interest, he's not as focused, and he becomes somewhat of a liability to the company.
Lucy bought out Desi, and she was running Desi Lou, and that was a very big deal.
Lucille Ball was the first female to have a controlling interest in a major film studio, and she was the chief officer.
From the moment she takes over the studio from Desi for $3 million, Lucille's main goal is to keep Desi Lou solvent. In 1966, Desi Lou's net income falls by 42%, and Lucille takes an enormous chance by greenlighting 2 drama pilots.
With Lucy at the helm of Desi Lou Productions, the entire creative world is changed. And so powerful is Lucille Ball, and she trusts herself so much that she is willing to take the huge risk and put her money behind Star Trek and Mission Impossible.
Star Trek and Mission Impossible cost $225,000 apiece to produce each week. Many of the Desi Lou executives were against greenlighting the pilots.
Because they were 2 times more the cost to produce.
Without Lucille Ball, there's no Mr. Spock.
As of July 2016, the Star Trek franchise has generated $10 billion in revenue, making Star Trek one of the highest-grossing media franchises of all time. With 6 films, the Mission Impossible franchise has churned out $3.6 billion at the worldwide box office.
Think about this. This is the red-headed woman of comedy launching 2 of the most iconic American series ever, Star Trek and Mission Impossible. What would life have been without them?
Having succeeded in saving Desi Lou, Lucille makes the difficult decision to sell. In 1967, Gulf and Western buys the studio for $17 million, approximately $130 million in today's terms.
Lucille Ball really surprised everyone as a businesswoman. She really wanted to push the limits in television. She was willing to take risks, and they paid off.
Lucille's first love would always be performing, and in 1968, she forms Lucille Ball Productions and produces her 3rd sitcom. Here's Lucy also stars her teenage children Lucy and Desi Jr., and her husband Gary Morton is one of the producers.
Lucy Arnaz and Desi Arnaz Jr. grew up with privilege. They grew up with 2 amazingly well-known parents, but they were raised in a way where if you want something, you have to go out and get it. You have to work for it. I interviewed Lucie Arnaz a number of years ago, and we were talking about when she and Desi Jr. Did Here's Lucy. She really had to work hard. You know, Lucy had very high expectations for them.
By 1974, Lucille hangs up her sitcom shoes and raps Here's Lucy, having starred in nearly 500 sitcom episodes since the debut of I Love Lucy.
Lucille Ball had an incredible run on television from the very early 1950s until the mid-70s. By that time, with the money that she'd amassed from the sale of the Desi Lou Studios and from syndication, from the I Love Lucy show and Here's Lucy and the other projects she had been involved in, she decided that it was time to take a step back.
But 14 years later, Lucille Ball comes out of retirement to make what's expected to be a triumphant return to television in a new CBS sitcom, Life with Lucy.
Why did you decide to do it?
Thought it was time. Yeah, things seem to have gone full circle in television. And I don't like not working. I've missed it tremendously. And Gail Gordon was available, and Aaron Spelling, and my husband Gary Morton, and ABC made me an offer that I couldn't refuse.
Life with Lucy earned her $2.3 million. The show gets disastrous reviews and is canceled after 8 episodes.
The fact that Lucy's 1980s sitcom didn't go had to be a crushing blow.
And I think at that point she felt that people didn't love her anymore, which was far from the truth.
Soon after the cancellation of Life with Lucy, Lucille Ball gets even more devastating news.
She finds out that Desi is dying from lung cancer, and she rushes to his side. Luckily, they remained close because of the kids after all of those years.
3 years later, in 1989, Lucille Ball goes into the hospital for open heart surgery. She's 77 years old.
Some people would think that was a little bit old to take that kind of risk, but Lucy was a tough lady, and she wasn't afraid. Unfortunately, the surgery didn't turn out very well.
I remember like it was yesterday where I was at that very moment when I heard Lucille Ball died. I think the world stopped. I really think it did.
Lucille Ball leaves behind an estate of $40 million and rising. She leaves her husband, Gary Morton, well provided for. Eventually, Gary will marry former golf pro Susie McAllister.
When Gary dies, all of his personal effects, all of his estate, he leaves to his second wife.
Years later, Susie Morton stirs up controversy when she puts up highly intimate and valuable items belonging to Lucille Ball for auction and triggers an intense legal battle with Lucie Arnaz.
Those items go for a real high amount of money because they're one of a kind.
This is one of those disputes that's one of the stranger ones and one of the uglier ones.
When legendary comedy star Lucille Ball dies in 1989 at the age of 77, her estate is estimated at $40 million and counting. Her will leaves her husband, Gary Morton, well provided for and puts her children, Lucy and Desi Arnaz Jr., in charge of her trust. They are now the owners of their mother's intellectual property rights.
Whoever owns those intellectual property rights are the ones that control them, the ones that license them out to third parties, and the ones that are able to collect the royalties.
Lucy and Desi Jr. also share the image rights to the characters Lucy and Ricky Ricardo with CBS. The show continues to make millions for the CBS Corporation in reruns, and there are upwards of 1,000 licensed Lucy products.
Those items can command a lot of shelf space that have her name and the name of the show, I Love Lucy.
Lucille's kids spend months organizing her personal effects. The bulk of the personal memorabilia goes to raise money for charities and to museums, like the Lucy Desi Center for Comedy in Jamestown, New York.
The personal memorabilia that a celebrity has, especially after they pass away, can often be one of the most valuable assets that the estate has.
6 years after Lucille's death, Gary Morton marries Susie McAllister, a former pro golfer who's 23 years his junior. They would live in Lucille's Palm Springs home that she left to Gary in her will, along with all the contents.
When Gary dies, Susie Morton, his wife, gets the house. And with it, all the contents. Some of the items that were in there were really personal to Lucille Ball.
Fast forward 10 years, Susie Morton is ready to renovate and decides to do some house cleaning. She collects a treasure trove of personal effects belonging to Gary and Lucille Ball, including intimate love letters between the couple. Susie's intention is to auction everything off.
Some of those contents are Lucille Ball's white Rolls Royce, her jewelry, her Lifetime Achievement Award, and the love letters. And these would be the sticking point.
In particular, Lucy Arnaz wants the love letters and her mother's Lifetime Achievement Awards back in her possession.
I, for one, am a collector. I live in a Lucy house. I have memorabilia all over my house. But I think if something is that personal of a letter that's handwritten by Lucy, I don't necessarily think that should be auctioned off. You know, that belongs to Lucy and Desi. That's to the estate. I don't think that's to the general public.
Lucy Arnaz plans to display the Lifetime Achievement Awards in the Lucy Desi Center for Comedy in Jamestown, New York. Lucy and her brother Desi Jr. are the trustees of their parents' estates and have a history of auctioning off items to benefit charities and museums, including the one in Jamestown.
I have to take my hat off to Lucy and Desi Arnaz Jr. They understood the love that viewers had of both Lucy and Desi, and they never walked away from it. And they ultimately established a museum in Lucy's hometown in Jamestown, New York. And it's a very big draw for Jamestown. It really put that town on the map. In 2011, in celebration of Lucy's 100th birthday, there was a big festival. They had 13,000 attendees, and they brought in, for the Jamestown economy, $3.6 million.
Auctions are big moneymakers for celebrity estates. In 2007, Christie's Auction House in New York featured 10 lots of Lucille Ball's jewelry, raising over $256,000, with a portion going to the museum. Who knows how much money intimate items like love letters would obtain?
In the case of Lucille Ball, there were letters that involved her love life that were a real personal part of her and gave a real insight into who she was. So it would be the ultimate coup that a particular fan would get if they got a love letter that was written by Lucille Ball.
One of the cards from Lucille to Gary reads, "I just want you to know I am very aware and impressed with how hard you are working these days. I know how tiring and nerve-wracking it is too. I've gone through it. You're a great producer and imaginative and appreciated exec, my darling." 1 week after the auction is announced, Lucy Arnaz tries to stop it through the court system. Susie Morton decides to fight back.
These personal items must have been worth a fair amount of money, because it was worth it for Susie Morton to go to court, pay attorney fees, and battle Lucille Ball's daughter over them.
Susie Morton goes further, claiming that because Lucy Arnaz never came to pick up the items after her mother's death, she forfeits her rights to them.
She probably could have gotten them back from Gary Morton at any time, but she didn't.
Susie Morton was arguing that she had abandoned these items, so it was Susie's prerogative to put them up for sale. But on the other hand, is there a statute of limitations to recover personal effects?
So, of course, there's a legal battle that ensues now. And this is a really big, nasty fight.
Over 20 years after legendary comedy star Lucille Ball dies, her daughter Lucy Arnaz is locked in a court battle with Susie Morton. They're fighting over Susie's right to sell personal, intimate letters Lucille wrote to her second husband.
Susie Morton is Gary Morton's second wife, and she's the one that inherited all of Lucy's property and wouldn't give it back to her kids.
Lucy Arnaz wants the letters and Mother's Lifetime Achievement Awards back so she can display them in the museum dedicated to her parents' legacy.
These were very sentimental things that had a lot of value to the family. Of course, they also had a lot of monetary value as well.
In the celebrity world, these items are as precious as a Picasso. They don't belong in a personal collection, they belong in a museum, like the Louvre. But in this case, Lucille Ball's museum.
To this day, I Love Lucy reruns are aired all over the world and bring in over $20 million a year for CBS. Lucy's celebrity star power is still strong, so personal letters are a hot commodity for collectors.
It's those very personal items that give us a glimpse inside how she was thinking, and those would certainly, in my opinion, have the most value.
In one of the disputed letters, Lucille writes, "I'm just sitting here thinking how much I love you. You are a real special guy, Gary, and my guy. Bless you, your missus." And a card from Gary to Lucy reads, "Happy, happy anniversary. Thank you for making me so happy. You really are some kind of wife." I love you, I love you, I love you, and I like you so much.
We like to think that Lucy was only married to Desi Arnaz, but she had a very, very long, beautiful love affair with her second husband, Gary.
Within a few days, the judge agrees to temporarily stop the auction, but only if Lucy Arnaz pays a fee.
The judge ordered Lucy to pay a $250,000 bond to stop the auction.
It was reported that Lucy couldn't afford that. This is really surprising considering the fact that her mom passed away with a $40 million estate. Maybe she didn't feel that she wanted to post the bond based on principle. We don't really know.
There's a difference between what people can afford and what they're willing to pay. It was very clear that Lucy Arnaz wasn't willing to pay $250,000 to get her mom's stuff back.
But in a last-minute turn of events, the auction house offers to return Lucille Ball's Lifetime Achievement Awards to her daughter.
In the end, the auction house does right by Lucy's legacy.
But it's a bittersweet victory when the letters, along with the other personal possessions, proceed to auction.
Lucy Arnaz may have saved her mother's Lifetime Achievement Awards, but actually Susie Morton was the one who came out on top. She ended up not only winning in court, but making about $230,000 at auction.
Lucille Ball was such a famous and beloved figure that to have her legacy tarnished, even years after her death, by an estate battle just seems really, really unnecessary and unseemly. It's not the way she would have wanted it to go down.
Even though Lucille's letters didn't stay with her family, it shows how strong her legacy continues to be. With the ongoing popularity of all things Lucy, in 2019, her children partnered with CBS for an expanded I Love Lucy merchandising program.
So Lucille Ball had a very distinct look, and she represented an era. And that vintage era is very marketable today, and there are consumers that want that look.
Decades after her death, Lucille Ball continues to delight new fans all over the world with her comic genius.
She was not only one of the greatest television actors of the 20th century, but she was also one of the great pioneers of the 20th century.
She's an inspiration for a new generation of female comedians who are following in her career footsteps.
Lucille Ball was a wacky, fiery redhead that really paved the way for comedy in a way that we hadn't seen before on television.
The amazing thing about Lucy's career was she basically came from nothing, and she did it on her own. She's self-made.
But she must also be remembered for her love of family and everything she risked to make sure they were taken care of.
I think that Lucy Arnaz has done a very good job of preserving her mom's legacy. Whenever you think of Lucille Ball these days, it's always something positive. You remember her for being funny and for being powerful and for being the first of her kind. And that's why everybody loved Lucy.